Hello, everyone. Welcome to DET Practice, Duolingo Advanced Course. Today, we're going to explain the question type, interactive speaking. Let's start with the introduction section. Interactive speaking is a new question type added in July 2025, replacing a previous exam question type called Listen and Speak. Interactive speaking appears in the form of a dialogue where students will hear 6 to 8 questions and are required to answer each question immediately after listening, completing the conversation. The challenge of this question type is that you only have 35 seconds to answer each question, and except for the initial 15 seconds, there's no preparation time before answering each question. So it requires candidates to have quick, on-the-spot reaction abilities. But essentially, this type of question focuses on testing students' language foundation, especially the speaking component. Additionally, all question audio can only be played once, so you need to listen carefully to ensure you accurately understand the key information in the questions. Unlike speaking questions in other DET exams, except for the first question, subsequent questions are dynamically adjusted based on the student's answers. You can understand this as somewhat similar to adaptive questions. Another key feature of this question type is that each interactive speaking question contains 2 sets of questions, with each set sharing a topic, and there will be a topic switch in the middle part, such as question 4 or 5. When answering interactive speaking questions, just like answering other speaking sections, we should make our answers clear, natural, and easy for AI to recognize. Additionally, we need to ensure vocabulary and sentence structure diversity. Keep answers as fluent as possible. Reduce unnatural pauses or overly slow speech. Moreover, we need to ensure our pronunciation and intonation are as natural as possible, correctly using rising and falling tones. Avoiding overly flat intonation that sounds like memorized answers, as this can easily be judged as pre-prepared answers, leading to exam scores not being certified. Next, let's look at the categories of interactive speaking questions. Interactive speaking questions cover numerous topics, which we can roughly divide into the following 8 major categories: personal growth and values, education and learning, work, career, and economics, technology and future, society, interpersonal and communication, culture, arts and media, lifestyle and daily activities, environment and public spaces. Note that interactive speaking questions often involve 2 categories within one question due to topic transitions during the questions. Now let's look at the scoring rules for interactive speaking. Consistent with other open-ended questions, when AI evaluates interactive speaking answers, it analyzes answer quality from aspects of grammar and vocabulary diversity, complexity and accuracy, relevance of answer content to the question, as well as fluency and pronunciation, then gives scores accordingly. Among these, answer content relevance and fluency are especially important, so everyone should pay special attention to these when practicing speaking questions. Having understood the scoring criteria, let's now look at answering strategies for interactive speaking questions. First, note that interactive speaking questions appear in audio format and can only be played once, so while listening, you need to actively analyze the listening content, that is, the question type and key information. For example, whether this is an open-ended question, such as describing something, or a choice-type question, such as asking for your opinion, asking whether you agree or disagree with something, etc. Then, catching key words in the questions is very important. For instance, in questions, you might hear formulaic expressions like, I see, interesting, or when switching topics, you might hear long sentences like, I would like to change topics and ask you a few questions about something. These sentences don't actually contain key content you can reference when answering, so during the exam, you need to pay special attention and consciously distinguish between useful and useless information. The second answering strategy is to make your answers as structured as possible. We all know that during exams, candidates under pressure might answer without logic, with scattered content, saying whatever comes to mind, which actually sometimes carries the risk of going off topic or having little content related to the question in the answer. So during regular practice, try to make your answers follow one or several fixed structures, which helps us quickly organize clear and logical answers. For example, we can use the following structure. When answering, first, state your viewpoint, then provide explanation and examples, and if time allows, you can also add some details to improve your answer. The third answering strategy is about time management. Interactive speaking answers follow a round-robin system where each round involves first listening to the question, then giving an oral response, with each response time being 35 seconds. Although the Duolingo exam doesn't set a minimum answer time for speaking questions, we still recommend that everyone organize at least 4 to 5 sentences in each round of answers, which is about a 30-second response, to ensure answer coherence and completeness. So during daily practice, we need to pay attention to time control, trying to avoid answers being too long, leading to incomplete responses during the actual exam, or answers being too short without fully addressing the question. The final answering strategy is to prepare some language materials in advance, such as go-to stories, or we call versatile little stories. We can prepare some universal stories for each category in advance, such as personal experience stories related to teamwork, daily challenges, and personal growth to use as reference when answering during the exam. Note that when using these, try to make simple adjustments and adaptations to the stories to fit the questions. Don't mechanically apply a story, making the answer sound unnatural. Additionally, you need to practice telling these stories repeatedly to control answer timing. At the same time, we need to pay attention to our pronunciation and intonation, performing the pre-prepared language materials to make answers sound more like natural speech expression rather than reciting passages. Having understood the answering strategies, let's now look at an interactive speaking question example. From the prompt section, we can see that this interactive speaking question is divided into 6 sub-questions, each with 35 seconds of answering time. Let's first look at questions 1 to 3, which are all about personal growth and values, what we call personal growth and values. Let's listen to the first question. Before listening, we can do a small exercise. Find paper and pen and write down the keywords you hear. Note that the DET exam doesn't allow using paper and pen for notes. We're only using them during practice. If your foundation is good, you can also try pausing this video after listening and attempt to orally repeat the question or translate the question's meaning. All right, now let's start playing the audio.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about mistakes and misunderstandings. Tell me about a mistake you learned something positive from.
Welcome back. Let's look at the question we just heard. The question asked us, I'd like to ask you a few questions about mistakes and misunderstandings. Tell me about a mistake you learned something positive from. Asking us to describe an experience where we learned something positive from past mistakes. So how do we answer this type of experience question? From our previous discussion of answering strategies, we learned that for interactive speaking questions, we can adopt preparation strategies similar to IELTS speaking questions, preparing some versatile little stories as language materials to use when answering questions. For example, here's a personal experience story. Last year, I volunteered to lead a group project at school. At first, I was nervous because I had never managed a team before. I made some mistakes like poor time management, but I learned to communicate better and delegate tasks. In the end, we completed the project successfully, and I gained more confidence. This experience taught me that stepping out of my comfort zone is the best way to grow. Good. This little story is about learning from past mistakes. This is quite suitable for the question we encountered. Combined with template sentences commonly used for experience-type questions, we can quickly organize an answer. For answering experience-type questions, we can start by saying, I remember one time, or there was this occasion when, to introduce past experiences. Then, after narrating the experience, use as a result, or this led to, or consequently to state the outcome. Finally, use it taught me, or I learned that, or this experience showed me to introduce what you learned or the lessons gained. Good. Now we've learned the little story and template sentences for answering the first question. Next, let's use these two parts to organize an answer. For example, you can say, well, I remember one time when I was leading a group project at school. It was my first time in charge, and I made a mistake by not managing our time well and failing to communicate clearly. As a result, we missed an important deadline, and then the team got frustrated. I decided to reflect, ask for feedback, and created a better schedule. We eventually completed the project successfully. It taught me that mistakes can be great opportunities for growth, especially when you take responsibility and make changes. Good. Now we've finished answering the first question. Careful students might notice that we made some modifications and adjustments to the little story to make the content more relevant to the question, and we use the logical structure to develop our answer. So, when using versatile little stories, remember not to apply them mechanically. Make appropriate adjustments for specific questions and ensure your answer structure is clear and reasonable.
Next, let's look at the second question. Like the first question, we can pause this video after listening to the audio and do a small exercise, trying to orally repeat the question or translate its main idea. Now let's start playing the audio.
Thanks. I've got a different question. Tell me about a time when you mixed up two similar things.
Good. Welcome back. Let's look at the specific question. Thanks. I've got a different question. Tell me about a time when you mixed up two similar things. The key words in this question are mix up, a time when, and two similar things, asking us to describe an experience of confusing two similar things. The previous experience type story can still be used, but we need to make slight adjustments and add experience type template sentences. Next, let's try to answer this question. For example, we can say, okay, so I remember one time when I was leading a group project at school. I accidentally mixed up two similar roles, research and data analysis. As a result, two teammates did the same work while another task was missed, which delayed our progress. When I noticed the problem, I apologized and quickly reassigned tasks. This taught me to double-check responsibilities and communicate clearly. I also became more organized and confident as a leader after that. Then let's look at the third question. Like the previous questions, we can pause this video after listening to the audio and do a small exercise, trying to orally repeat the question or translate its main idea. Now let's start playing the audio.
Interesting. I have another question. How do you feel about admitting mistakes to others?
Good. Welcome back. Let's look at the specific question. Interesting. I have another question. How do you feel about admitting mistakes to others? This question is not a descriptive type asking us to describe an experience, but rather asking for our opinion and attitude about admitting mistakes to others. For this type of question, we can still use the previously prepared little stories as material for our answer, such as using them as evidence to support our viewpoint. Additionally, since interactive speaking questions appear in continuous Q&A format, and except for the first question, subsequent questions are dynamically adjusted based on the candidate's answers, it's fine for answers to be related to previous content. Before answering this type of question, Let's first learn a template structure suitable for opinion and attitude questions. We can start with, in my opinion, or from my perspective, or I believe that, or personally, I think that to introduce our viewpoint. Then use the main reason is that, or this is because, or another reason is that to state the reasons for thinking this way. After that, use for instance, or for example, or a good illustration of this is to provide examples proving the reasonableness of your reasons. If there's still time, you can use therefore, or in conclusion, or to sum up, I feel that, to summarize your answer. Having learned this template structure, let's combine it with our previous little story to answer. We can say, personally, I think admitting mistakes is very important. The main reason is that it shows responsibility and helps build trust with others. For example, when I was leading a group project, I accidentally mixed up two similar roles, which caused confusion. I admitted the mistake, apologized, and quickly fixed the problem. As a result, my teammates respected my honesty and our teamwork improved. To sum up, I feel that being open about mistakes makes you a better team player and a stronger leader. This way, we've finished answering this question. Next are questions 4 to 6. Note that starting from here, there's a topic transition in the questions. These questions are about lifestyle and daily activities, which is lifestyle and daily activities. Let's look at the fourth question. Like the previous questions, we can pause this video after listening to the audio and do a small exercise, trying to orally repeat the question or translate its main idea. Now let's start playing the audio.
Thanks for discussing mistakes and misunderstandings with me. Now I'd like to change topics and ask you a few questions about selfies or taking pictures of yourself. Do you think selfies are a good way to share experiences? Why or why not?
Good. Welcome back. Let's look at the specific question. Thanks for discussing mistakes and misunderstandings with me. Now I'd like to change topics and ask you a few questions about selfies or taking pictures of yourself. Do you think selfies are a good way to share experiences? Why or why not? The question is long, but actually, the first two sentences are just formulaic expressions or topic transition cues, and only the last sentence is the real question. This question asks whether selfies are a good way to share experiences, so it still belongs to the opinion and attitude type. For this type of question, we suggest everyone prepare a story about personal, pleasant experiences, such as travel experiences. Let's look at this little story. During a family trip last year, we hiked up a mountain early in the morning. The trail was tough, but the view at the top was incredible. Clear skies, fresh air, and endless greenery. I took a selfie with my parents, all of us smiling and a bit out of breath. Later, I shared it online, and many friends said it felt like they were there with us. That moment reminded me how photos can capture not just places, but the emotions we experience together. We use such material as examples in our answers, then combine it with the opinion type answer template structure we explained earlier to quickly organize an answer. Let's look at the following response. In my opinion, selfies are a great way to share experiences, especially meaningful or fun moments. The main reason is that they make memories more personal and relatable. For instance, during a family trip, I took a selfie at the top of a mountain after a long hike. When I shared it, many friends commented that they felt like they were there with me. In conclusion, I think selfies, when used thoughtfully, help us connect and express emotions in a way that words sometimes can't. This way, we've completed our answer to this question. Next, let's look at the fifth question. Like the previous questions, we can pause this video after listening to the audio and do a small exercise, trying to orally repeat the question or translate its main idea. Now let's start playing the audio.
Okay. I have another question. Describe some places where people often take selfies.
Good. Welcome back. Let's look at the specific question. Describe some places where people often take selfies. This is a descriptive question asking us to talk about places where people often take selfies. Descriptive questions have diverse themes, and it's not easy to form a fixed template, but we can use the following structure to answer descriptive questions. For example, in the opening part, we can say, I'd like to introduce the topic. Then, if we need to add details, we can use phrases like, firstly, it is known for, and another notable point is to add more details. For the example part, we can start with, for example, or for instance. And finally, if time allows, we can use overall, this is a good example of, or to sum up, it shows, to summarize. Having understood the structure, let's try to organize our answer to this question. For example, we can say, I'd like to describe some places where people often take selfies. Firstly, tourist attractions are very popular because they offer iconic backgrounds and memorable views. Another notable place is social events like concerts or parties where people want to capture fun moments with friends. For example, many take selfies at famous landmarks such as the Eiffel Tower or Times Square. Overall, these places are good examples of popular selfie spots because they help people preserve special memories and share experiences with others. This way, we've finished answering this question. For descriptive questions, due to their wide range of topics, I suggest that during regular preparation, you accumulate language materials according to the categories we discussed earlier, building up expressions and example sentences for each category. This way, we can perform well in speaking exams.
Good. Next, let's look at the final question, which is question 6. Like all the previous questions, we can pause this video after listening to the audio, then try to orally repeat the question or translate its main idea. Now let's start playing the audio.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. How have selfies changed communication among young people?
Good. Welcome back. Let's look at the specific question. Okay, let me ask you another question. How have selfies changed communication among young people? This question is also a descriptive type, asking us to talk about how selfies have changed communication among young people. So we can continue using the descriptive template to organize our answer. For example, we can say, I'd like to describe how selfies have changed communication among young people. Firstly, selfies allow young people to express themselves visually, making conversations more personal and engaging. Another notable point is that selfies help share daily life moments instantly through social media. For example, friends often send selfies to stay connected and show what they are doing in real time. Overall, selfies represent a new way of interacting that combines images with messages, making communication faster and more visual among young people. This way, we've finished answering the question. Finally, let's summarize the content of this lesson. We first explained the format and structure of interactive speaking. Interactive speaking actually tests candidates' speaking performance in real communication environments, with questions containing 2 topics and a total of 6 to 8 questions. After listening to each question, candidates have 35 seconds to answer, completing 6 to 8 rounds of dialogue in this format. Like other questions, this is also scored by AI, mainly examining candidates' performance in grammar, vocabulary, fluency, pronunciation, and content relevance. Among these, content relevance and fluency are especially important for speaking questions. Next, we explained answering strategies for interactive speaking questions. First, you need to focus when the audio is playing.
Since the audio can only be played once, candidates must quickly analyze the question type while listening and mentally note key words in the questions for later answers. Then, in the answering phase, you can use structured responses to make your answers clearer and more logical. We focused on explaining the universal structure of viewpoint, explanation, and example. We can practice answering questions according to this structure to ensure our answers are well organized. Then we explained time management when answering. Because each sub-question has 35 seconds to answer and there's no preparation time before answering, our answers generally need 4 to 5 sentences, with response time controlled around 30 seconds to ensure completeness. During regular practice, do more timed exercises. Don't let your answers be too long or too short, and train your time control. Additionally, since this question type requires high immediate reaction ability from candidates, language material preparation becomes quite important for answering. This is our tool for quickly organizing answers and increasing fluency. So before the exam, prepare several sets of highly versatile stories about personal growth, teamwork, challenges, etc., and practice flexibly adapting them according to different questions.
At the end of this lesson, let's talk about key techniques for achieving high scores. First, we need to become familiar with structures and template sentences for answering various types of questions. Through extensive practice, become familiar with this content, striving to be able to speak subconsciously and fluently, improving answer fluency and logic. Additionally, we need to practice story adaptation ability. Speaking exam questions are diverse, and we can't prepare and conceive a story for every question in advance, so we can adapt based on our reserves to suit different speaking questions. The final point to note is maintaining fluent and natural answers. When answering, try to reduce unnecessary pauses and repetition, pay attention to pronunciation and intonation, express clearly and naturally as if chatting with a real person. This way, we can achieve a good score in the speaking exam section. That's all the content for this lesson. Welcome everyone to follow our YouTube channel to get the latest exam information and materials. See you in the next class.